Hi, this is Max from Spaceship Villain, and I wanted to show you a quick Photoshop tutorial. I was working on some concept art the other day, and I needed to create an image of a planet. And I thought it might be useful to show you what I ended up doing, the steps that I took to create this image. And this is going to be an intermediate level tutorial. I'm going to assume that you know your way around Photoshop already, and specifically that you know things like clipping masks and layer masks. I was working on something the other day where I needed a planet, so this was what I came up with just over the course of some experimentation, and I'm going to show you how to create something similar to this as your end result. So I have a lot of photographs, mainly just vacation snapshots of interesting textures from the beach. I don't know about you, I like to collect texture photographs, so I have these laying around, but this is just to show you that it's not anything special, not anything custom to this task, just repurposing things that I already had on my hard drive. So we're going to take this as our base image. What we're looking for here is really just this kind of noisy, cloudy texture. Not too much specific granular detail, just kind of a general purpose randomization. So we're going to crop it down to just this selection. The larger selection you can have to start with, the better quality it's going to be as an end result. You don't need to stress that too much, but depending on the quality of your source images, you may end up with some noise if you start with too small. So the first thing we're going to do is notice the little lock image here on your background. We want to just double click to send it to a new layer to get rid of that. We're just unlocking our transparency so we can have an alpha image for the background. So to actually create the shape of our planet, all we're going to do is just distort spherize. I don't know what yours defaults to. I set mine all the way up to 100. Alt F or Command F on a Mac is the keyboard shortcut to repeat the last filter. I find that 2 spherize in a row is a really good combination for this. What we're going to do next, we're going to just drag out some guides. You don't have to be too precise because Photoshop is going to center them for you by default. So we go from the center of our image. Notice I have the circular selection. Again, keyboard shortcuts for this vary, but I'm holding down Option Shift to get a perfect circle from the center of where I clicked. And you don't have to be exactly perfect along the border here. You probably, in fact, want to leave a couple pixels worth of space, but get the general selection of your spherized shape, and then you want to inverse that selection and delete everything else. So that's the base of our image right there. What we want to do next is we want to find a second image that we can use, kind of overlay over the top of it, something that will look nice to add a little more detail. And it looks like this one here has some nice cloudy noise here going on. And I mean, again, you'll have to experiment with this a bit. This is going to be a little bit of trial and error. Let's get back to the square selection. Again, holding Shift to make sure we have a perfect square. Move that over a bit and crop it down. Now with this one, notice we have some key white lights showing up here. I just want to really quickly, using our tool, the healing brush, shortcut J, just want to really quickly knock out some of those highlights because those are going to look weird if we leave them in the distortion. I'm not being too precise here, just sample, replace, sample, replace. If this were the image that I was working on primarily, I would definitely take a little bit more care on this, and you certainly should. But just for the purposes of the tutorial, we're going to go pretty quickly on cleaning this up. And that's it. That's good enough for our purposes here. So we want to select all of this, copy it, and drag it over here. So you're going to want to get it as close to the same size as you can, just so the spherized distortion tends to match up. Then what we did here was we create a clipping mask. So if you're not familiar with that, it basically just says to take the alpha of this underlayer and apply it to our top layer, so only that piece shows through. And you can see that's what we have here. What I'll do next is go in and do our same thing, spherize, and once more. And what we want to do now is set that to overlay mode. Now, depending on how you have yours configured, what source images you used, you might find that screen or even multiply would work better for you. But for this example, we're going to go with overlay. This is, again, you'll have to play around with that and see what works best for your image. So we want to go in to levels and just make this darker, give us a little better contrast there. And already that's looking pretty good. So let's go in, let's give ourselves a larger canvas size. And since this is a planet, we want to see what it looks like in space. So let's just create a solid black background. Okay. And on our main layer here, what we want to do is give it a little bit of inner glow. Oh, not a little bit. We want to bump up the size pretty large and choke to about 4%. So what this is doing, I find that it looks right for a planet. I don't know if it's scientifically accurate or not, but this would simulate some sort of the atmospheric distortion of the color that we're seeing. And we want to bring that down to its own layer. So if we go to Layer and Layer Style, Create Layer. What this is doing is it's going to split all of our layer styles out into their own layer, so that won't mess with once we start putting in different alpha channels. We'll still have this at the same spot. So I think that's actually that's a little too saturated. So let's knock that down a little now that I'm looking at it. You don't want to give that one too much color. There we go. Okay, so the final stage in just this rough overview of it, what we want to do is we want to give it a layer mask. So what this is going to do is to create the shadow. Our planet is a large sphere, so we want to make sure that, you know, whatever side of it is not facing its sun would be in the shadow here. So the way we do that, like I said, we create a layer mask, make sure the layer mask is what you have selected there, and then we want to do a gradient. Now, I have it really basic. I have my black and white colors selected, foreground to background gradient. But what I want to do is, I don't want to have it that gradual. I want to give it a little more of an area to work with. So let's drag the white slider over to 50% and move the black slider in to about 90. Also, I don't like leaving this one as full black. I find if you give it a value that's just slightly brighter than that, that tends to look nice. What that's doing is, instead of going to solid black, we leave it a little bit, just barely illuminated, so that would be your ambient light coming from all of the other stars. So we have our gradient set up. Now we want to just go ahead and drag it out. Again, you'll have to play with it a bit to see where you want your light source coming from, what you want it to have, if it's nighttime or daytime, where you're looking at this part of the planet. So I tend to like something like this. You see, that was I was holding shift to constrain it to a 45-degree angle. We start a little bit inwards and we end a little bit inwards, and I think that tends to look pretty nice. So that's the basic idea of it right there. You can play with it a little bit to see, I mean, this is a pretty barren looking world. What we could do also is, if you're going to drag out a copy, hide one of these. This is the copy of our overlay, the one that's in overlay mode. And let's take that, let's go into hue saturation and make this one green. You don't have to look at the specific values here. It's probably going to vary pretty widely depending on your own setup. But we want to get it just visually, just eyeball it to make it look green. Bump up the saturation if you want to, maybe not quite that far. And again, we're going to want to create a layer mask. Again, with black and white selected as our colors, we just want to go to Filter, Render, Clouds, and go to Levels, and you want to really chop in a bit on this one from both sides. We want to get a good contrast on that. And so our layer mask is applied, so we're only seeing green shine through in the parts that are white on this layer mask. And then if you go ahead and turn our original overlay back on, you see we have some areas that are still desert and some areas that look like they have a little bit of foliage in them. So I think that looks pretty nice. But it's up to you. It depends what type of planet you're trying to make. If you want a desert world, I think that's pretty solid. So again, like I said, this is going to be a lot of trial and error for you. It depends on what sort of images you have available, what sort of planet you want to make. If you took, let's say, one of these images, if you sampled from here, that would give you a really different looking planet than what we have in here. Ours looks pretty flat at this point, but if you took a sample from an image that had a lot more variation, a lot more rock-like surface, that's the sort of planet you would end up with. So it's a lot of trial and error, it's a lot of experimentation, but this is a general workflow that I think you'll find useful. So I hope you found that useful. Let me know in the comment section if you have any specific questions about this technique or about the various steps. I probably glossed over a couple of the keyboard shortcuts I was using, so if something wasn't clear, just let me know. I can answer any questions. And in the meantime, please check out the website, www.spaceshipvillain.com, and check out our games on Congregate. Thank you.